I've got some things I wanted to share with you, some ideas that I came up with over the weekend. You're the first person to actually hear these harebrained ideas. So
Okay, okay. I'm
congratulations.
interested. Yeah. I feel honored. Fair enough.
But no, this is something I've been talking about for years. I feel like the idea of learning from failure is something that we
Hmm.
all have to grasp and get good at. But learning from anything is something that doesn't necessarily come to mind when we set out to vibe code specifically, is what
Right.
I was thinking of. And in at least my situation, and I know it's similar for a lot of others, I'm creating a lot of these disposable demo apps and just getting
Right.
ideas out of my head where I'm creating just literally anything. I'll have an idea and I'll sit down with Claude, hash out a prompt, and then take it somewhere, often lovable. And in minutes, I'll have something. And a lot of times I'll just create a GitHub repo to get the process started while I'm having a conversation with Claude. And then I will clone that repo locally to my environment and then take whatever maybe ideas and maybe even some HTML, some code from Claude and bring that over into usually Cursor and then just start from there building something that what they call vibe coding, right? Or I don't know. For me, it doesn't always feel like it's technically vibe coding. Sometimes it's
There's no
like
vibes,
even
just coding.
it's like a sticky note. I'm just getting an idea down, and I'm not
Right.
really like we. I think part of what want to talk about today is just being deliberate about these things when you do them so fast. It's real easy for me to just throw some code together, throw it into repo, get it up there. There were still a lot of things that I learned during that experience that aren't going to show up in the code necessarily. They're things that hopefully I retained, but it got me thinking I'm probably not going to take the time to do a retrospective after each vibe coding session.
Especially if you're going fast. Yeah.
That's the antithesis of this whole thing. But that doesn't mean that exercise or the effort to capture what took place isn't still important. And so I
Right.
think maybe what we have to do is start putting in things that just automatically captures it for us before these ideas, before these projects are just gone. But also for those of us who aren't trying to work in a box, I'm like creating apps and we're all doing this kind of stuff on our
Right.
own. But eventually, when some projects start to get legs, you want to get other people involved. And so you have to collaborate. And that means knowledge transfer, sharing information about what you've
Right.
already done in this project and what you're trying to do in this project. You see where I'm going with all this is there's
I,
just a lot that happens that I think we need to capture for a
I do.
variety of reasons.
Some of it is like one, you're attacking this on the toil side. So you're creating tools on a regular basis. You're trying to get past the toil, but as a result, you're working really fast. And the question is on the back end, are you learning? Is there anything novel? What's coming out of this? Or what can you share with the team? I think that's the right, maybe DevOps or platform engineer, SRE approach. It's as an engineer, as an IC working in this field, I can definitely create sample apps, but as a senior or staff engineer, what can I do to help my team? Or how can I help others who are following in that footstep?
I feel like the progression is natural. Previously, we talked about how it's now to a point where it's important to me for sure for a lot of these apps to be instrumented so that I can
Right.
see what's going on with them, good and bad. And now I'm to the point where I'm also creating so many demo apps. I'm up to 78 repos now. Half of these are just apps that I've created on the fly, real quick, in a variety of tools. And none of them I really was deliberate about learning what happened in there. What code was I using? What decisions was I making and why? What was the genesis of some of these things? Like they're completely black boxed unless you just want to look through the code, which they're so small that you can. But anyway, I think as we start to work on bigger and bigger projects, knowledge transfer, learning, all that kind of stuff is going to become more and more important. Got to
Right.
expose what's happening in this new era, this new paradigm of development. All these demos that I'm making, I'm now thinking, okay, what I want to do is actually give it some sort of prompt. We're looking at Claude here. So, anyway, this was my first attempt at let's give whatever agent and IDE you're using, let's give it a prompt to use before we get started so that as the project starts to get built out, we'll already have markdown files that behave as our retrospectives. We already have some other markdown files that tell us just like other additional information about this project. And it'll just be ingrained into the progress of the vibe coding session. It's not going to be like a Q&A at the end because honestly, once I'm done vibe coding, I'm done. And it might be
Right.
because I got to go. I'm probably already like 10 minutes late from something, but I do not have time for a retro. I can promise
Right.
you that. So we got to capture this like in real time. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. And that's what I set out to do with this, is create a prompt that I can then have it create milestone checkpoints and create things about both my individual learnings, but things that I think might be more important for a team. Maybe some of the rules that we've established over the course, because you and I have talked about setting the project requirement stock. Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
And sometimes I don't know until I'm a little further into the conversation what it is I want to require, but we still want to capture all that. So I set this up in a new project, and I want to show you the result of what it did. So a demo that I made over the weekend to help me understand what's going on with my local network versus
Right.
my ISP, because I was having network issues. And what I did is I gave it this session, pre-session text prompt at the bottom of my README. And this whole README was basically generated in the process. But at the bottom of the README, you'll see a couple links that it helped me, or that it created. So this retrospective session is the first one I want to show you. And this is basically the core of what I was trying to capture. Of course, we got the
Right.
basics of what this is about, some of the objectives, and then here's where it gets into the insights and the stuff that I wanted to share with everybody. Now, I will say this is just a first pass. I think that there's more detail that I want this to have. This still feels a little too high level for me. And I also think that during the process, a lot of what was being added into this retrospective tracking file first was like perfect, but then over the course it would go back and update and remove some things, and I kind of
Oh,
wished
okay.
it wouldn't have. It's
Right.
constantly updating it rather than making it a log. So I need to do some tweaking in I think the way that it creates some of those files.
Yeah, I think one of the things you had in here reminded me of a decision tree. Have you ever used one of those in Jira or
Yeah.
Confluence? Yeah,
Mhm.
where it's actually important to know I made a decision. This is why, and this is how we got here. Because you can go back and look at it and say, "Oh, if we went the other route, what would that
Yeah,
look like?"
yeah, exactly. And I'd like to know that. Like this here is one of the other files that it creates for me, is this team knowledge base, which is, I think, trying to touch on what you're getting at, is like, what are some of the things that we decided in terms of the tech? What
Right.
is the implementation strategy? Any kind of security considerations? Obviously, cores is something that always comes up. So these are the insights that I want to share with anybody else who wants to play in my sandbox, wants to work on this project with me. And yeah, that's my new trick that I'm hoping to implement into all my sessions, just to fine tune that idea. The README is like the place where, whether it's me or you contributing to my project, like we show up on the README, and everything you see first is, to me, it should be the most important stuff, right?
Yes, absolutely. I,
I
I
feel
want that
like
executive
this,
summary at the top. I don't want your sponsors, your build status, none of that. I just want, what does it do? Why is it important? What are the
yeah.
salient facts? Yeah, absolutely.
But do you feel like this retrospective stuff belongs in that same space? Is it important enough to get it to you early, or will you
I
find it
think
below the fold?
I think when we started, I was of the opinion of no, that it should be below the fold. But after talking, I feel like it should be higher to the top. Finding something that's novel or finding novelty, what the key things we've learned are during this, I think that is important to have at the top. So, like, why does it matter? So, when I'm coming to a repo, well, why do I care about this repo? Why am I even going to read this README file? I'm very busy. I'm a platform engineer. I got a whole bunch of things going on. This organic, open source thing that you've done is cool, but also a lot of other work to do. So, I feel like having it above the fold is better, in fact, because
Yeah.
I don't think as a human, one of the things I'm good at is describing to you, Jason, why you should look at my open source repo. I'm pretty sure I'm actually bad at that. Generally, I'll describe what it does, but I won't tell you why it's important. I'll just tell you what it does, what language it's in, maybe what license it's got. I did want to ask you a question though. Have you ever come across the concept of something called alla prima? It's more for painting, but it's painting with a limit. Have you heard this before?
I think I know the concept. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that term. Let's say I'm going to only paint with pink, and that's an element of the medium that I have, and because I'm only doing things in pink, it really like limits me, but it also opens up things to like new
Yeah.
ways of
So
thinking.
you get it. So I think that's what the word means, and I think the practice is to. It's like an open air speed painting, and the
Mm,
goal is to not. It's not that the painting is important; it's the practice of doing this over and over again. And I feel as you're creating these, I don't want to say quick, but relatively quick in terms of like months or years that we normally see in enterprise. But these quick applications, what you're learning over time is not how to paint better. It's how to teach others to paint quickly. And I feel like what you're getting out of this are lessons that you're learning, but also that you could share with others. And I think that last prompt that you gave Claude Desktop was really indicative to me of where the power really is. Like, how can we make this process collaborative, or how would I share this, or what is the step to not only look at the toil that I had or the friction log that I had, but to help others who are coming down this path behind me. If Jason Hand is the trailblazer, then if I'm coming behind you, Ryan, and I've got to go down that same path, I know where the path is. If you're blazing that path for me, how's it going to be easier for me coming behind it? And I feel like a retro is actually a really good way of doing that, is pointing out those things. Like, make sure you look at this. And if it's a form for vibe coding, make sure you've got these things in there, or make sure to ask these clarifying questions as you're going along. But I think when you're talking about automatically doing it, I think in my brain, I thought, no, you can't do this because I am the person bringing business value to me. But I think what you're telling me here is that that third hand that I'm using elsewhere for coding help can also be helpful for finding things like novelty, usefulness, or avoidance of toil in my project. And I like that, actually. I think having that above the fold is, sorry, big
Yeah.
long rant to say that
No,
repeating this process is actually teaching you, but also you can teach others.
look, the retrospectives are important,
Yeah,
and you got to walk the walk, talk the talk. Like, if I'm going to be developing code, I have to advocate for doing it right, the best practices, and that's instrumenting your code. And that's also after you're done with a project or writing for the day, writing code. Like, we should be capturing ideas, and things are happening so fast right now that it's becoming, I think, to where if you can't capture it in the value of it is gone. And also
right.
maybe even the we've always known that if you don't try to capture it as soon as possible, the longer you go, the harder it is for you to recall that information and
Absolutely.
document it and do anything with it. So if we can get it in real time, or as close to real time as possible, and this is where it all comes down to, is my mind is always trying to get these AI agents and the different tools to take care of the stuff that I don't want to do and I don't have
Right.
time to do, but I know it is super duper important. This is just another example of that. And I'm just going to let it do the hard work for me. And so that's my message today, is I think we might want to start letting these things help us out in terms of capturing more in-depth learning through the process as well.
Yeah, I'm here for it. And I'm also here for Jason's step-by-step guide to vibe coding. It feels like this is on the tail end and the front end. And it feels like we also covered a bunch of the meat, I think, last week in terms of what you actually need to do when vibe coding. So we're almost at a step-by-step guide. I love it.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. We'll see if we can put something together that's a little bit more official if it starts to look that way. Thanks for letting me share some of these crazy ideas.
Of
And
course, I want to try it.
awesome. Looking forward to seeing how it goes for you. I think there's definitely some more tweaks to be done. We'll maybe do an update in the future, see how it's going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. That
All
was
right.
cool.
Talk to you later. Bye.